Good evening and welcome to the September 28th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals here in the library. To start, we'd like to go over the rules of the hearing process, so I'll get right into that. All public hearings are advertised and held in accordance with the open meeting law, and the application files are open to the public for review prior to and after each hearing. Everyone attending the public hearing is asked to show courtesy and respect by silencing their cell phones and other electronic devices. I also ask that you listen to the applicants, witnesses, and the board. Please refrain from any private conversation in the hearing room or outside of the hearing room. We also ask that you refrain from making any derogatory statements and to please exit the hearing room quietly. I'd also like to note, since we do have a packed house, that under the public meeting law requires us to leave the rear doors open. And please, anyone who is back there, do not block the door. In the event that we do go over capacity, which we hope not, we would have to reschedule this hearing tonight. All public hearings are recorded, and we are being televised tonight on FCTV. To ensure a true and accurate record. We always ask the clerk to open up the hearing, to read the application into the record, along with any referrals from town boards. And the applicant or their appointed agent will briefly summarize their application and state why relief should be granted under sections of the Falmouth zoning bylaw. We do ask that applicants' presentations do not exceed 15 minutes. And once the applicant has presented their case, we do turn it to board questions. We'll ask the applicant any pertinent information regarding the application. Once that is done, we also turn it to the public for public comment. We do ask members of the public, we hold them to 2 minutes for questions, and when it does come time for that, we ask you to please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and to also ask the questions through the board and not to the applicant themselves. After that, we usually turn it to board discussion of the application, and then we may hold a possible vote if we're satisfied with the amount of information that we received, or we may continue the matter to another date and time certain. I'll introduce the board tonight. On my far right, your left, is Jerry Patamas. He is an associate member of the board. To my right is Ed Van Kuren. He is a full voting member of the board. I am Terrence Hurry. I'm usually the vice chairman, but tonight I am the acting chair. We have Kim Beelan to my left. She is the clerk of the board, followed by Paul Murphy. He is a full voting member, and Robert Dugan, who is an associate member of the board. With us tonight is also Sri Boudreau, who is the zoning administrator, and Ashley DeMello is the recording secretary for tonight. On the agenda tonight, we have no continuations. We do have 4 new public hearings, and we do have some items on our open meeting. And the board also reserves the right to vote to take any items on the agenda out of order. So, seeing that. Motion?
I guess we'll move to take, I don't have my agenda with me. Is the open meeting items out of order first?
Okay. Kim has made the motion to take the open meeting agenda items out of order. Does anyone second that?
Second.
All right, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, first we have the minutes from September 14th, 2017. Has everyone had a chance to review?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, you have one.
I do.
Motion to approve?
That's a motion to approve from Jerry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. I'll give you your phone back.
Up next, we do have a board determination of insubstantial for a 6-month extension of comprehensive permit for Megantic Crossing LLC.
Board members, Michael Galasso has contacted me and asked for a 6-month extension for the Megantic Crossing 40B on 28A. He's trying to get financing together and possibly changing the plans again. He wasn't definite about that, but they are asking for a 6-month extension. And that would be comprehensive permit number 17-16. The board needs to determine that the request is insubstantial. If you determine that it's insubstantial, then it's an automatic approval. If you determine that it's substantial, then it has to go for an advertised hearing and public notification. I'm asking that the board make a determination that it is insubstantial, but it is up to the board. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I think it should be insubstantial, and I'd make a motion if, unless there's discussion as to.
Let's have some discussion.
Yeah, well, I think it's insubstantial too, but I just have a question, because I know this has, Megantic Crossing has been, I think it's been since the first iteration of this, it's been years at this point, and there's been numerous extensions, and so I think under the comprehensive permit law, isn't there something where if it's 2 years or something like that, at some point does it, okay.
I researched it. A comprehensive permit is good for 3 years, and if the board feels there's reason enough, because we don't have the 10%,
Yes,
and then we
okay,
should probably vote it, because it is appealable.
okay. I don't think it's a substantial change, I think it's insubstantial, but I just didn't know if, because there have been so many extensions, it just seems
This
like.
was first approved under Cubby in 2009, and a comprehensive permit's good for 3 years. It's been
Yeah.
extended. I believe this will be the 4th
Yeah,
or 5th extension. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. Sorry.
8 years, but,
Mhm.
okay. I agree, I think we've gotta do it, I just
Yeah, I agree.
was wondering about that.
Make a motion to find it insubstantial.
I'll second it.
Okay, so that's a motion by Jerry, second by Ed to find board determination of insubstantial for a 6-month extension of comprehensive permit for Megantic Crossing, application 17-16. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, board. The next one that I have is, I believe I sent it to all of you. I've got comments from the majority of you on the Chappie LLC Nimrod building. I did forward this to Attorney Moynihan. We did discuss one of the conditions. So if the board would please briefly review the findings and conditions, if you have any discussions or direct me to change it. This is, you directed me to draft this decision as an affirmative vote, and I did. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, recusing.
I apologize. I should have given you time. Anybody have any questions for me? Any changes?
Oh, I think it's very good.
Thank you.
I
Excellent.
do as well.
Do you agree with the conditions?
I do.
Yes,
I
do.
changed
And
condition 6.
The condition that you're referencing, condition 6, application was made under the understanding that it was professional office space. I know the board had a few questions about that and the butters as well, so I think it's fine.
Then I need a vote from the board for sitting members, and this will be down to 4 since Chairman Foreman is not here tonight.
Right,
The hearing has been closed, so it is the 4 members who will vote on it, which would be Ed Van Kuren, TJ Hurry, Paul Murphy, and Rob Dugan. And for it to pass, it has to be unanimous.
Would anyone like to make the motion to approve application 61-17?
I'll second it.
Okay, so that's the motion by Bob, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you. And the final item that I have, some of you members have been on the board when we approved the addition for the William Frederick House to allow her to sell water, snacks out of her gift shop to the people on the bike path. She could not put a sign in her front yard to bring in people off the public way, Palmer Ave. What she is asking is to put signage on that gift shop that faces the bike path, that allows people on the bike path to see that that they are invited to buy coffee, or, excuse me, water, snacks, ice cream, which is what this board has granted her the right to do. Again, she cannot sell to the open public, only to people who are staying at the guest house or people off the bike path. She's been very pleasant. She's got bike racks out there that are on her property for the people. So if the board doesn't have an issue with it, it'll just be on the back of the gift shop facing the bike path, and it'll say Gift Shack Gallery Building.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Sounds reasonable to me, too. Yeah, I'll go along.
Okay,
We need a motion.
Yes.
we do.
That you administratively approve this.
I make a motion that we administratively approve whatever Suri just said.
I'll second it.
It's a motion made by Jerry, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That is all that I have. I suggest that the board table the procedural rules and policies again.
Okay.
And I don't know if the board has any updates or future agenda items, which if you're looking to put anything on the agenda, please don't do it till Christmas time. We
All
are
right.
packed, if you could see your agenda right in front of your scheduled hearings. And with that, I'm done.
Okay, and seeing no correspondences or board updates, we can move right along.
You'll have to make a vote to go back into public hearings.
Okay, would someone like to make that motion?
I'll move to go back into public hearings.
Second
Motion made by Kim, second by Ed. All those in favor?
it. Aye.
Aye. Okay, on to new hearings. We have application 66-17, Stifel, 41 Nashawina Street in West Falmouth. Yep.
Excuse me, Chairman. Could you please designate who is going to be sitting on this?
I do have to do that.
You do.
Let's see. We'll give that to Bob.
All right. Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Kurt P. and Deborah R. Stifel of Falmouth, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-3C and 240-69A of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 41 Nashawina Street, West Falmouth, Mass. For referrals, Concom order of conditions was heard for house construction due to be issued in the next week or two, and it was, we did receive that order of conditions on September 26th. Engineering had its a little bit different, so I'll read it. This application was reviewed only for impacts to public rights of way and public utilities. Nashawina Street is a public right-of-way in this area. Alterations are proposed to the right-of-way that will require filing a permit with the engineering division. Reinforced turf is acceptable for a driveway. However, the first 5 feet from the road surface is required to be a hard surface. Asphalt, concrete, cobbles, pavers, etc. And the first 1 foot is required to be asphalt. The connections to public utilities will require permission from the appropriate town department. The project must not direct any stormwater runoff to public property, abutters, or rights of way. Dry wells are proposed for the roof. Please make sure the house number is posted in a location visible from the street. Fire department had no comment. Assessors had no comment. And planning had no comment.
Before we start, I just want to tell everyone in the back there, we may have some late arrivals, to please not block the doorway. We do have some standing room only space to the left of us here. And Attorney Clower, I do believe we have a reserved seat up here for you.
Thank you. Steve, you was
Sorry, Steve, I didn't see you there. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Raul Isari from Homes McGrath, representing the applicant, the Stifel family. With us tonight is also Shay Wood from the architect company Rescom, representing also the client. The project before us tonight is for tear down and reconstruction of an existing non-conforming dwelling. It's a 4-bedroom, single-family dwelling on the property. It's non-conforming to 3 particular regulations in the bylaw. One is the setbacks to the front street, which is less than 25 feet currently, setback to the side yard, which is less than 10 feet, and lot coverage exceeding 20%. The property has been in existence since the 1950s as a single-family residence. It is serviced by on-site septic system. The septic consists of just 2 separate cesspools. The proposed project is to tear down the existing structure and build a new structure that conforms to FEMA flood zones. It is located in a velocity zone, so the entire structure has to be elevated 2 feet above the flood level for the velocity zone. That's what's being proposed here. The overall height of the structure will still remain below the 35 feet, which is the town limitation for building heights. The front setback will exceed the 25-foot minimum setback, so we're eliminating that nonconformity. The side setback is also being eliminated as a nonconformity because we now conform to the minimum 10-foot setback. The lot coverage is slightly improved, but more or less remains at the 25%, which is still above the 20% town regulation. So we need a special permit to allow the reconstruction or the demolition of the existing non-conforming house and construct a new house still above 20% of the lot coverage. It is still a little less than currently, but it is still above 20%. The other 2 nonconformities are being removed. And I just want to point out that the order of condition, as was mentioned, was approved. So any decisions here also have to abide by those, or any construction here has to go and abide by those conditions imposed by the Conservation Commission. The existing septic system, which consists of 2 cesspools, is going to be removed. There's going to be a new Title V septic system. Currently, there is no paved driveway on the property. Right now, the existing garage is on the back of the house. There's a grass driveway or dirt driveway along the side of the house, and that's the only way they access the existing garage. The proposed work is just to propose pavers, grass pavers for the driveway. The parking will be underneath the house since the new house is going to be elevated above the flood zone. One of the comments from the referral from engineering is that the first 5 feet of the driveway has to be paved. However, that goes against the regulations for conservation, which says that there cannot be any increase in impervious surfaces. So one thing battles the other one. Conservation already approved the project with the grass pavers, and we respectfully ask that no additional pavement is imposed on this project. Currently, there is no paved driveway, and the project will still be the same. And if there's any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Bob, you want to start us off with questions?
Actually, I've reviewed the plans and I don't actually have any questions.
Okay.
I
Go
don't
down
need
the
the
line,
TJ.
Paul.
No, no questions.
Okay. Kim, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so height of the structure, total height, I think.
34.8 feet.
8 feet. And what's the current height?
I don't think I have that information.
I
It's
received it.
it's below 30 feet.
21, was it? Okay. 28. All right. But It's the average grade is at 7 elevation, is that true? And then you have to, can you explain that to me, because I know you
Right.
have to rise up and, yeah,
So the average grade, taking the front of the proposed house, the grades existing on the ground today, that becomes the average grade of the two front corners. From there, you can go up to 35 feet. In the architectural plans, that information is shown on the elevations. It shows what the average grade was calculated at and what the ridge of the roof is proposed to be.
okay. So for the velocity zone, you're in, what's the base level have to be for elevation for that?
So the elevation of the flood zone is,
Okay, and then they start right up.
is 18, so the lowest structural element of the house has to be 2 feet above that 18.
Okay, so which is the 20 where you start. So you're
Right.
starting at the minimum possible. And then 4 bedrooms, remaining 4 bedrooms?
Remaining 4 bedrooms.
Okay,
The existing is 29 feet.
thank you, Suri.
Thank you.
Is that 29 feet elevation or 20, because wasn't it like the structure was 21 and a half feet, but the elevation was 29
The
feet?
actual elevation is 29.
So on this one, 34.8 is the actual height, and then the elevation will be higher than that.
You're starting at main grade.
Yeah,
Raul, you're the engineer, not me.
So if the
I think
elevation,
that's right,
if
yeah.
the elevation of the bridge right now is 29 or 29,
Mm-hmm.
based on average grade, however, the average grade of the existing house is forward from
Yeah.
the proposed house. So the average
Okay.
grade of the existing house is lower, so it's about 22 feet.
and then you moved it back to accommodate
The front setback.
the front setback. So that accommodates for the increased elevation. Okay. That was all I had for the time being. Thank you.
Ed, do you have any questions?
No, I think it's a good design. I think it's gonna be an improvement to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Jerry, any questions?
No questions.
All right, I do have a couple, Raul. Let's see. Is there any existing shed on the property, and is any proposed?
No proposed sheds. The understory of the house, since it's being elevated, there's plenty of area that's going to be used for some storage. I do want to point out that the Conservation Commission reviewed the project. There are 2 proposed enclosures for storage underneath the main house. Those are not going to be enclosed based on the decision from Conservation. So there's going to be storage below the house, but nothing is going to be enclosed other than the section that has an elevator and the stairs going up to the main house.
Okay. So you wouldn't mind if we condition no shed on the property if,
That's correct, because the calculations are calculated without a shed for that lot coverage. A shed will be a structure and it will kick it above the existing lot coverage.
okay. And following up on a question that Kim had earlier, the Title V, is that rated for 4 beds?
It is for 4 bedrooms.
Okay. That's all I had. We do have a, sorry.
So Conservation is saying that they can't even do the breakaway panels?
Not for the storage. So the 2 enclosed storage are being taken out of the design.
So the storage is gonna be visible? Wow. Interesting.
We do have quite a few members of the public here tonight. We'll see if they have any comments for this project. Anyone in favor that would like to speak? Okay. Is anyone opposed to this project and would like to speak? Seeing none.
Move to close the hearing.
All right.
Did you have another question?
Jerry moved to close the hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
That's second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did I make that motion? I'm sorry. That's it.
You're not
Yeah,
sitting
you
on
are
it.
sitting, oh, no, you're not.
No,
I
I'm
got
thinking you are sitting on it.
we'll take
I'm
that
looking
back
at you.
because
So
Bob
the-
was sitting on
please-
it.
Please,
Someone else make the motion.
yeah,
Ed,
remove
would-
that
Yeah, I'll make the
motion.
motion.
Ed will make the motion to close. Would anyone like to second that?
I'll second it.
Second by Kim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So I'll just, I guess, make some comments per usual. I always have stuff to say. I think that the design is really attractive. I think, I saw this and I'm like 34 feet, 9.5 inches. I want to say I hate, but I know it's it's in keeping with the bylaw, but to see these small houses elevating so significantly, I mean, it does, I think, change kind of some of the optics of the street and how it looks, but I think that they've really taken into consideration the architecture. It's really an attractive design with different materials and things like that. I think that the fact that they have to raise it, it's been, I think, tastefully done in terms of the scale as well. And I think looks like a good project, and I think it will be in keeping in part with as more of these houses need to go up, because this is what's going to have to happen. And the house next door was renovated, I think, recently too, and is a taller height as well.
Just like to echo Kim's sentiments, there's been a lot of recent projects in that immediate area, and I do think that the project is in keeping with the neighborhood. And like Kim said, we are dealing with the FEMA regulations with the houses that have to go up, and it is, all things considered, it's very tastefully done.
Yeah, we got the bulk calculations. It's in keeping with those. It's not the most significant, and yeah.
It's right in the middle, so that's good.
Yeah. So I'll move to approve application number 6617.
All right, it's motion by Kim to approve. Is the second?
I'll second
Second by Ed. All those in favor?
Oh,
I'm sorry, we
findings
do
and
the findings and
conditions.
conditions first.
Please,
Getting
findings and
getting ahead of
conditions.
myself.
I'll run some down because I kept it. So 4 bedrooms, remaining 4 bedrooms, eliminating side yard setback nonconformity. And front, yeah, well, I was gonna do them one
Oh,
by one.
sorry.
And the front yard setback nonconformity.
I was just condensing.
And slight improvement to lot coverage. I think it's important to have a finding that it's in the FEMA velocity zone with 18 elevation, so they're putting the base level at elevation 20. I think it's important to find that Concom issued an order of conditions, and also testimony that that order of conditions, I mean, I guess it's in the order of conditions relative to those breakaway panels, so we probably don't even need to make a finding as to that. That they're removing the current septic system and installing a new Title V system. Do need a finding as to that no additional paving and grass, right? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think I'd make a finding that the testimony was by the engineer that Concom does not want it, and I would say it trumps. There's no regulation for what the engineering, this is their preference.
I see, okay.
So, but I think it's important that you make that finding, and just note that it is in the order of conditions.
Excuse me, no, I thought he said he was gonna put pervious pavers.
He
Yeah.
is.
Okay,
But the referral from engineering was different, so
That's
Raul
correct.
explained that that's why they're, so I'll do it based on his testimony, if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
Finding that there's no proposed shed, and then I mean, I don't know if everybody else wants this, but I do think, well, no, I guess we don't need to put it. I was gonna say about the increase in average grade because it's moving back, but no one would really know that unless they sat there and calculated it, so. Any other findings? Sorry, TV.
No?
It's not more detrimental, please?
Yes, oh, yeah,
242.16.
242.16. And, conditions
Conditions? Sure.
per plans,
For plans.
no more than 4 bedrooms. And no shed.
Should we put that they need
No
to-
accessory structures?
Should we put that they need to post the house number, the street?
You can make a finding that
Yeah.
that was on the referral, I wouldn't make it a condition, I mean,
Yeah.
it's in their best interest, so emergency vehicles can
Yeah.
find, you can convey that.
it's a building code.
then the building will determine that.
What do you think about as-bills?
Well, the
'Cause
thing
you're
is,
going up
they're
to-
improving,
I know.
the setbacks, making them conforming. What would you want the as-built for?
Because of the height.
For the height.
Well, again, you're in the velocity zone. Is the grade gonna change? I mean, they do have to do an as-built to the building department. We've had one that was 35.1 inches that had to come to the board for a determination of de minimis. It's up to the board how you want to do that. The building is requiring it, obviously.
I would like that. I think when
Okay.
it's close, we usually,
Do you want it just for that? Or you
just
want
for the height.
no lot coverage?
No, because they're improving it and it's not near that 25%. It's
Okay.
21.1.
Is that it?
Do we also want to adopt Concom's
No.
order of conditions? No.
Okay.
You know,
I
it
did
just
have
ties
that
their
too.
hands. If they go back to conservation, then they gotta come back to us. It's not fair. It's their regulations. We're adopting their one condition of the pavers, so
Sounds good to me.
if that's okay with the board.
Yes.
That's fine. All right. I think we're all
Sorry.
set.
I wasn't gonna talk, was I?
That was a motion to approve by Kim, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you. Can I have the plans?
Yes.
The other ones.
Next up on the agenda, we have application 63-17, Marcantonis Properties LLC, 117 through 127 Main Street, Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Marcantonis Properties LLC of Mashpee, Mass. applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-104 and 240-105 and 240-107 of the Code of Falmouth regarding parking relative to change of use on subject properties known as 117 and 127 Main Street, Falmouth, Mass. For referrals, Concom only concern is drainage on property and how this can be improved. Wetlands just south of property. Does current drainage flow into the wetland system of Cider's Pond? Engineering, standard comment, and the project must not direct any stormwater runoff to public property, abutters, or rights of way. Assessors, no comment. Historical Commission, no comment. Planning, no comment. And Fire Department, no comment. We also received one letter of support, one letter with comments and concerns, and 11 letters with comments and no objections. That is it. Oh, there's new plans.
And Sari, I do need to appoint an alternate member. Since Bob had it last time, we'll give this one to Jerry. And we're just waiting on plans. All right, all set?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Stephen McKenzie, and I represent Marcantonis Properties LLC. With me tonight is Nick and Catherine Marcantonis, who are the principals of the LLC, as well as Michael Borselli, who is the principal of Falmouth Engineering, who was our engineer for the development. Marcantonis Properties LLC is the owner of 117 Main Street and purchased the property some months ago from the Eastern Bank, so they are the current owners. Nick and Catherine have over 38 years of experience in the restaurant industry, and very successful experience at that. They've owned a restaurant in Belmont for 38 years. They have, for many, many years, have owned Stelio's Pizza in the Pompanesett Marketplace in New Seabury, and over 3 years ago, they established the Estia Restaurant in Mashpee Commons. And they've decided that they would like to bring the Estia experience to downtown Falmouth. The property is shown as Lot 2A on the site plan and contains 20,458 square feet of land area. And as I said, it is the former branch of the Eastern Bank. The property is located in a Business 1 zoning district, and the applicant proposes to establish a Class 1 restaurant and the former bank, and that Class 1 restaurant is a by right use in the Business 1 district. The existing building is not historic, but the property itself is in a historic district. The applicant went through a lengthy process with the Historic Commission and has received its certificate of appropriateness on July 10, 2017 for the plans that are before you today. I want to go through a couple of things before I get into my discussion, to go through setbacks and lot coverage. Under section 24068A4, there are no required setbacks from the street for this proposed use. And lot coverage under 24069A, permitted lot coverage is 70% by structures and 90% by structures, paving, and parking. The existing lot coverage by structures is 25.3, and the existing by structures, paving, and parking is 54.8, which is both considerably less than what's allowable. By our changes, we're only increasing lot coverage by structures and structures, paving, and parking by 1%. The property is also located on the municipal sewer system. We've hooked that up recently. The site plan shows 16 parking spaces with 1 handicap space. Although the site plan doesn't designate the parking space, the handicap parking space is out in the field, and it's marked with a blue handicap symbol, and it's located just to the right of the handicap ramp to the rear entrance of the former bank. We filed for a special permit to establish a Class 1 restaurant in the former location of the bank under sections 240, 104, 105, and 107. And when the town adopted section 240, 104, it recognizes the importance of a vital and flourishing downtown. It seems to be universally agreed, if you talk to anybody in the street, that the 2 finest downtown areas on Cape Cod is Falmouth and Chatham. Mashpee has the Mashpee Commons, but that's not downtown. Mashpee's downtown happens to be the country store, the police station, and the Dunkin' Donuts. So anywhere you go, almost everybody agrees that Chatham and Falmouth have the nicest downtowns of all the 13 towns. Section 240-104 states, and this is important, and I quote, "Finding that Business 1 districts on Main Street are unique, having a large amount of public parking spaces available, and further finding that in order to enhance the economic vitality of downtown Main Street, some expansion of retail activity balanced with residential development is desired and possible. Parking requirements shall be waived for the following," and then it goes on to state certain conditions. This is a poorly worded zoning bylaw, and it's archaic at best in its application. There have been as many as 8 previous business or retail to restaurant conversions on Main Street over the past so many years, and the town has historically and consistently not required any person to request a special permit for such restaurant conversion. I've compiled and filed with the board a list of those conversions, and I'd like to take a moment to go through those with you so that you can see the historical treatment that these conversions have had. This is important to this application. And as I'll go up and down the street, this is a listing that I filed of all the ones that have gone without a special permit for this conversion, even though each one had a requisite increase in the parking demands. That's the big concern today, is that we have a change in use, which requires an increase in parking. Okay, several of these restaurants also have outside seating on town property in addition to the interior seating, and provide little or no parking of their own on the site. First one is Bangkok Thai Cuisine at 291 Main Street. That was a conversion from a pharmacy. It has 4 outside seats on town property and provides 8 shared parking spaces in the rear of the property, which is shared with the business at 295 Main Street. Bear and Boots Gastric Pub at 285 Main Street was a conversion from John's Shoe Store. It had been John's Shoe Store for many, many years. It was converted over to the Rue Bar, and then it's been reconverted to Bear and Boots. There are 8 outside seats on town property with 0 parking spaces. And again, this is a significant increase in parking requirements. The Parkside Market at 281 Main Street has 6 to 12 outside seats on town property and also provides 0 parking spaces. Simply Divine Pizza Company at 271 Main Street was a conversion from Main Street Pizza and Deli, which was a small takeout pizza and sub shop. They were famous for their takeout pizza. Their oven was only small enough that it could only cook 2 pizzas. It was a small place, it had subs, it was much less dense than the business that's there right now. It also did not have a liquor license. It was converted to a Firefly restaurant and then to Stone Lovin'. There were 9 outside seats on town property, and there's shared outside rear parking with the Boulangerie Patisserie and the Harvest of Barnstable. They did, at one point, get a special permit, and that was so that they could do takeout on a different portion outside of Stone Lovin', but it was behind the Harvest of Barnstable. They never exercised that permit, but they did come before this board to get that special permit to operate the takeout. The Boulangerie Patisserie at 267 Main Street was a conversion from a photo shop and an eyeglass shop. There are benches on town property, and this is the only restaurant conversion which does have a special permit. And the reason why it does is because it was considered a Class 2 restaurant, and a special permit is required by this board to operate a Class 2 restaurant in the zoning district. La Cucina Sommer at 237 and 239 Main Street was a conversion from the Bojangles Women's Clothing Store and Cape Cod Chicken, which was a small takeout restaurant. There were 7 reserved parking spaces behind the restaurant, no special permit for the conversion, but a special permit for a seasonal tent that's in the rear of the lot, which holds 25 seats. It comes up every year. It's been like 3 or 4 years with you. That was originally converted as one restaurant, and then many years later, they acquired the lease to the spot next door, opened the wall up in between, and then built, for anybody who's been there, the bar and the lounge area and the seating on that side. Anejo Mexican Bistro and Tequila Bar at 188 Main Street. That was a conversion from the Village Cafe, which was a small breakfast and lunch restaurant, but was later converted to Cafe Bellagio and then Anejo. That has 45 outside seats, most of which are on the town property, and only 2 reserved parking spaces in the back. And immediate abutter to the proposed Estia restaurant is Osteria La Cerveta at 131 to 133 Main Street. This was conversion of 2 previous businesses. One was Almeida and Carlson Insurance Agency, and the other was the Church Travel Agency to a restaurant. It has 36 total outside seats, 8 on town property and 28 on site, and there is some reserved parking in the rear, which is shared with the condominium development back. As I say, it's important that not any one of these properties have ever been required to come before this board because of the change in use and the increase in parking demands. And that's been historic and consistent. I met with Rod Palmer, the building commissioner, on August 8th and presented him with the town's historic and consistent treatment of such conversions, and he asked me to put a request in writing to him so that he could respond. And at that meeting, he stated to me that he did not believe that he would require us to come before the board. He's the zoning commissioner. I prepared such a letter for his signature on August 11th. I waited for his response, and when I hadn't heard anything, I went to see him, and he verbally stated that he would require us to come here because of the change in use. I've actually never received to this date a written response from the building commissioner. Under Section 24108, the table of minimum parking requirements, a restaurant bar requires 1 parking space for every 2 seats. We initially had proposed a 212-seat restaurant, which would require 106 parking spaces. We've scaled that back to a capacity of 194 seats, and that includes both the inside and the seasonal use for outside seating in the front and outside seating on the rear, which some is for front areas for dining and the side is for a lounge. So that results in a reduction of 18 seats from the initial filing, which would reduce the total parking requirements to 97 spaces. There are 16 spaces on this site, and as I said, more than any other restaurant on Main Street, we have more on-site parking. That meets the requirements for 32 seats. There are more parking spaces here than any other restaurant, as I previously stated, and under Section 24107, reduction by right, the 97 parking spaces can be reduced by 25% or a reduction of 24 spaces, which brings the required parking down from 97 spaces to 63 spaces. And with the 16 spaces already provided on the site, the remaining required parking spaces is 47 spaces. There are multiple municipal parking lots for each of the businesses and restaurants on Main Street to share, with no particular entity having any more rights to the parking spaces than any other entity. In addition to the municipal lots and the library lot, there was parking along Catherine Lee Bates Road, Main Street, and along North Main by the Village Green. If you go down that side, there's parking on both sides of the Village Green. The Board of Appeals, as a Board of Relief, has vast and broad discretionary powers to provide relief in situations like the one presented to you tonight. And under Section 240-107B, the Board is empowered to, by special permit, to further reduce the number of parking spaces required on your determination that special circumstances such as shared use of parking for activities that have different peak times and demands, that a lesser number can be required. And we ask the board to make such a finding tonight and treat this applicant as all others have historically and consistently been treated in the town of Falmouth. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And I imagine there'll be a few.
All right, turning to questions by the board. Jerry, would you like to start us off?
Well, one I think is for your engineer. I think your plan says it's existing grease trap. What do you mean it's going to be a proposed grease trap?
Jerry, can you speak up? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
I think the plans I have in front of me say you have an existing grease trap, which is unusual for a bank. I'm assuming you're going to put that grease trap in.
Yes, please. You'd have to go to the podium. Introduce yourself.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mike Borselli, Falmouth Engineering. To answer Mr. Thomas's question, it's labeled existing because it was very, very recently installed. So we changed it from proposed to existing. The entire grease trap sewer system has now been connected to municipal sewer, so all the proposed elements are now existing.
Thank you, Michael.
Also, Joe?
How many seats or parking spaces do you need for the outside parking?
For the outside parking, there's,
I mean, the outside
Diane.
dining.
the outside dining, there are 36 seats on the outside, excuse me, 34 seats, so that's 17. And again, that'll be seasonal. And same with the lounges on the other side. We worked carefully with the architects for the folks from Osteria La Savetta. As a matter of fact, we granted an easement to them to increase their seating on the outside, and they have 36 seats. And so we worked together. We both have sailcloth designs over the top, and what we tried to do is have the two outside seating areas blend harmoniously together, so it looks like when you come in, you know, that they both belong with each other.
And the hours of operation?
It's 11:30 to 11. The Marcantonis family, they run their other restaurant the same way. They're much more focused on the food than it is being a bar. So the kitchen will close at 10, and everybody will be out by 11 o'clock. And we'll leave the other establishments to stay open later. So it'll be 11:30 to 11.
It would be really helpful if you all could use your microphones.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Microphone is for the TV. We've got 3 up there for public, so we've just got to remember
Sorry.
and wait for the chair to acknowledge.
No further questions.
Thank you, Jerry. Ed, any questions?
No further questions.
Okay. Kim, any questions?
Oh, yes. So I saw that there are 2 dumpsters, I believe. When will those be emptied?
More than likely, probably twice a week,
Yep.
as needed.
In the morning before
In the
cars
morning,
are
just
there?
as the other restaurants on Main Street are.
Any intent to designate any of those spaces for employee parking?
No, we're actually asking our employees, a lot of them will take the bus to work or carpool, and we're actively searching for some off-site space for the employees to park. We had been in contact with the church next door, which had a relationship with the bank, and they had a lease use area. As I understand it right now, the rector is temporary, and there's going to be somebody new coming in, and they're a little reluctant to enter into an agreement until such time as the new person's in. But we have been in contact with them, and we are actively seeking another offsite. We're talking to some other folks about having the employees park elsewhere.
Okay. And any signage proposed?
There is a sign that's approved. I'm sorry, I did file a copy of the sign. I don't have it with me.
For the parking?
Oh, for the parking?
For the parking, to say, you know, parking for this restaurant, Estia only, no others.
We hadn't proposed that, but it's not a bad idea.
Okay. That's all I have for the time being. I may have others.
Paul, any questions?
No questions at this time.
Bob, any questions?
Yes, Steve, what do you think the peak usage hours will be?
During lunchtime, they have an active lunch, and then typically, you know, at 5 o'clock after most folks get out of work, between 5 and 9,
And
then it seems to wind down.
do you have any opinion regarding the ability of the town spaces to absorb that kind of parking during those hours?
No, I walked around last night around 6:30 just to do some checking, and I found multiple parking spaces in each of the municipal lots, so. And again, we're only talking peak demand during the summer, and, you know, here we are in September, but I found numerous spots in each of the lots.
And on the exterior patios that being seasonal, any specific time frame on that? I know like Aneo does through the winter.
No, we won't be going
Heaters
through the
or-
winter. It's just going to be seasonal, probably close up in the fall and open up in the spring.
That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Bob. So the plans I was reviewing, it did state that it was 212 seats, but then with your testimony tonight, you're willing to reduce it to 194?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I assume you can submit plans showing 194?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And then the proposed seating out front, the seasonal space was at 36 seats?
I think it's 36 or 34 out front.
I thought it was 40. We counted it.
It has, exterior dining is 38 and the exterior lounge is 32.
That was going to be my follow-up question. For the lounge on the side was 32?
It is, but that's 22 and 36, but that was at 202 seats, and we reduced it down, so we'll probably be taking some of the outside seating that's in the exterior dining because it looks a little crowded and we can make a little bit more room in there.
Okay. And the easement area that was shown on the plan, that's the easement area you referenced with the restaurant next door?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 14-foot wide easement that allowed them to have an increase in their outside seating.
Okay, that does it for me. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple follow-ups. So the calculation that you gave, that 194, that includes or doesn't include the outdoor seating?
It does include the
It
outdoor
does,
seating.
okay. So let's say for 6 to 9 months out of the year, there will actually be, I mean, that's a significant number. You said 32 plus, was it?
Yeah, it's going to be about 50, 60 seats less
Okay,
for 6 to 9 months a year.
okay. Any lighting proposed outside?
There is lighting by the sign, but we went through in a sort of a rope lighting, and it's pushing downward so that it's not going to impact anybody else. It's not going to be all lit up. The signs itself that were approved by Historic are backlit on the outside of the building, so the Ostia sign sticks out from the building and it's backlit behind it. But it's a very low LED, and it's just designed so that it lights the area within the particular seating areas outside.
Any lighting proposed around the parking area?
We hadn't
In the
proposed
rear,
that.
no.
No.
Okay. And you said this is under the 60% lot coverage?
It's well under the 60.
Okay. All right,
There's about 25% right now by structures.
okay. That was all I had. Thank you.
Sarita, do you have any questions for the project?
No, I just want a clarification that it is not the ZBA's responsibility to go out and drag these people in. It's the building commissioner's determination to send them, according to the bylaw, to the zoning board of appeals.
Sure.
How many parking, I mean, I got lost from the 194 minus the percentage that's allowed, and I had 97 at one time.
Yep.
How many parking spaces do you need off-site?
Offsite 47.
47.
With a reduction by special permit of 25%, we'll need 47 spaces off-site
Okay.
at maximum capacity.
Thank you.
And because, as I say, on the consistent historic treatment, I was involved with Bangkok Thai cuisine, and we were not required to. That's the most recent one. That was only done a year ago, and we were not required to come here. And as I said, that was a medicine shop. So that now has something like 45 seats in it, which obviously then would require 23 parking spaces. There's no parking spaces on site, and the building commissioner at the time did not require us last year. And that was just before, I'd say about a month before Mr. Palmer came to town. So it was under Jim Brandolini's reign. That's the most recent conversion.
Okay, if the board doesn't have any more questions right now, we can turn it over to public comment. I'll just remind everyone out there, when we do acknowledge you, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and please direct the questions toward us. And any questions that you do have regarding the project, they are limited to what the application is stated for regarding the zoning bylaws. So with that, would anyone like to speak in favor of the project? Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Peter Milley, homeowner at 83 Allen Ave in Falmouth. I'd like to speak in favor of this application. Just to the fact that I've known the Marcantonis family for a long time. In their previous restaurants, they've had some challenges when anything is new. They've always been reasonable and a very civic-minded family, both back in Belmont where I knew them and currently in their restaurant in Mashpee. They always have been supportive. I think they'd be a welcome addition to Falmouth. So I'd just like you to seriously consider that in your determination tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the project? Yes.
My name is Donald Condaction, 71 Southview Way in Falmouth. I also have known the Marcantonis family and Nicky personally since his restaurant in Belmont. We actually had stores in the same town. Very hardworking family. He will run a great shop. I'd be very proud of him having him in your town. I highly recommend him.
Thank you. Is anyone else willing to speak in favor of the project? Okay. Would anyone be speaking opposed to the project? Yes, sir.
My name is Peter French, 850 West Falmouth Highway. Represent St. Barnabas Episcopal Church. I'm on the Vestry and Junior Warden and Finance Committee, and there are a number of other St. Barnabas people here. We have very strong reservations about this project. Not that it won't be beautifully done, because I think the restaurant itself will be lovely. But the basic issue is parking. The fact of the matter is, we are a campus. We abut the restaurant. We have roughly 6 buildings, 2 of which are residences. One immediately abuts the restaurant itself, and the other abuts or is contiguous to the parking lot. One is the residence of the priest, and the other is the associate priest, who has a family of 3 young kids, the oldest of whom is 7 years old. We have, to our benefit, a very large parking lot, which I'm sure everybody is sort of eyeing and saying, isn't this nice? And it is nice, and it serves our purposes beautifully, but it is private. And the reality is, and I won't go through the numbers, I couldn't replay them if I wanted to, but at a minimum, you're going to need 47 plus employee parking spots somewhere in town, and I live in this town. I walk the streets regularly. I think I know the parking lots, and basically those parking lots at night are pretty much full. It may be fair that there's been a waiver on all of these other restaurants, but the reality is this is a restaurant of 192 or 194 seats, and those traffic numbers probably don't bake into them turnover, so there's probably more of a need for parking than even those numbers suggest. And we sort of wonder where they're going to go. And I think water seeks its own level. We're right next door. The reality is there's going to be a lot of noise, both from car traffic as well as pedestrian traffic. Cars undoubtedly will find their way into our parking lot, as much as we're going to try and keep them out. And they have to walk right by 3 bedrooms in the priest's house, and right by a couple of bedrooms in the associate priest's house. There's a lot of noise. People will be coming out of restaurants at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. By the time the restaurant is cordoned off from the rectory property and the church property, the only way they're going to be able to get to that restaurant is to walk from the parking lot down the driveway, which literally abuts by about 20 or 30 feet 3 bedrooms. So this is the noise issue. It's a big noise issue, and that's a problem for us. The other thing we're very concerned about is safety. People look at St. Barnabas as a campus, and they come and they stroll the campus. They go use the labyrinth. They use Memorial Garden. They look out at Sitter's Pond on the stone benches. They just walk around, and when they enter the property, they enter from that driveway, and that driveway looks like nothing more than a very wide parking lot. And I've known many a time I've come into the campus on business, and I've had to wait for people to sort of spread apart because they really don't know where to go, and they don't even know we're behind them. And there's also a playground in the back of that parking lot. We actually constructed a Noah's Ark, and we have playground equipment. Young families come in and use it, and they play in the playground. The rector's family, the associate rector's family, they use it as their private playground. They have trikes and bikes, and their kids play out there. I just don't see adult beverages and kids on tricycles or people playing ball as necessarily a good thing. So both on the issue of noise and on safety, we really do have a problem, despite the fact I think it'll be a beautifully done restaurant.
Does anyone else here tonight wish to speak in opposition of the project? Okay, seeing none, guess we can,
Follow-up question?
I do too.
sure.
I guess in the restaurant in Mashpee, there is entertainment some nights, Friday or Saturday. That will be kept inside the restaurant?
Yes.
I mean, it's probably not in front of our board, but someone else grants entertainment licenses.
Exactly. And any entertainment would be within the building. And if I can respond to Mr. French to try to help alleviate some of the concerns. We haven't posed it, but if the board wanted to condition it and the St. Barnabas was happy, we'd be happy to put a sign out front that says no restaurant parking to try to help. But also, if you look at the plan itself, St. Barnabas is over this side, the entranceway, and this side. The two outside seating areas were designed to be pushed on the other side of the restaurant away from St. Barnabas. If you went out on your site visits, you'll see that there's a large canopy of trees, some very large trees, between the bank building and, I don't know if it's the associate rector's house. I said those trees are all going to remain. All of the activity, that's outside activity, is in the front, on the far side from St. Barnabas's property, and in the side of the restaurant, as far as possible from the rear line. We'd be happy to do any additional screening that the board would choose to put in between us and property. And as folks who've known Nick and Catherine, they don't tolerate a lot of noise or anything else. This is run as a restaurant, not as a bar. And we make sure that everybody is quiet that's on the site. And we'd be, as I said, we'd be agreeable to putting a sign up that says no restaurant parking. This is a small parking lot. You know, it's the largest one of any restaurant in town, but it's only 16 parking spaces. So there aren't a lot of cars coming in there.
I had a follow-up question. I think you just touched on it, Steve. The screening. So there's no screening currently proposed behind all of those parking spaces?
Well, if you're out there right now, there's a chain link fence with a big gate that goes in back. We'd be happy to provide some screening,
Like a
whether it's a
shrubs or
shrubs or a fence or something else in
wooden
back with
fence?
with some
Okay.
landscaping, shrubs in front of it. Something that would screen it off from the church to help with the noise and the visuals from cars coming into the parking lot. But right now, it's just one tall chain link fence with two big gates in it.
Okay. That's all I have. Is everybody-
Another question. Since they recommended it, and we agree about them, and I don't know if we can, putting up a sign on the church's property,
It's private property.
private.
We can't
So you're gonna have to put it on the
agreement.
stairs property, right?
We would have to either put it at the edges of our property if there's no restaurant parking.
Okay, just so that it's clear where it's going in.
And all I'm saying is the applicant would be agreeable to putting a sign if that's something the board required and St. Barnabas Church thought was a smart idea.
Any more questions, Ken?
No.
Okay, now I think it would be appropriate to have board discussion, given all the comments that were made about the project. Would anyone like to start us off?
Well, I'll start off just on the screening issue, because when I did the site visit, and you look through the parking lot, you look pretty much straight back towards the parking at St. Barnabas, so I think you would need some kind of screening there, because if I was looking for a space and going to the restaurant, and I saw anything back there, that's where I would go. I know he's only looking for the 47 spaces. I have some concern about where those people are gonna park in peak hours just from being downtown. Now, I understand what Steve was saying with these previous businesses that he listed, and I know it was a previous building commissioner, but If you look at those businesses, I think they should have gone in front of the zoning board. Maybe if they did, we'd have a little easier issue downtown with the shared parking. But even at the reduction of 194, I think it's going to be, at least summer peak hours, a problem. And if you can't get a parking space, the only thing they're going to do is keep looping around back and forth until something opens up. I don't know how you I don't know how you figure out what the perfect number is, but I think it's going to be a problem.
So you'd like to see reduced seating?
Yeah, I think it needs to be reduced a little more, and I do feel for the applicant. Maybe if he knew this in advance, talking to the department. But, I mean, just for example, this year, we all go back and forth to Town Hall Square. That's pretty much the closest one to go to. Town Hall Square was pretty much full most of the summer season. Behind the post office, you've got the shared parking for Quarter Deck or Eastman's. There's very rarely any spaces back there. And on top of that, during the day, you've got the federal post office across the street. So you've got a lot of cars coming back and forth for the post office area. I know that some of those spaces directly in front of where the restaurant is, because the post office have only 30, I think it's a 30-minute limit. So those spaces couldn't even be used for 30 minutes unless you were coming in and taking something to go.
It's only during
Yeah,
daytime
I mean,
hours.
it's only during the daytime.
At night, it's different.
You've got some other places downtown that right now aren't doing nightly, something like Pickle Jar all the time. But it doesn't mean they couldn't if they decided to. And I think it's going to be a problem in the town in general. I mean, no matter what comes in. But if I was going to do that, I think you'd need some kind of screening, some kind of signage for St. Barnabas. And that's it for now.
Jerry, I think you had a few comments?
I agree with the signing and the screening. I guess the thing that's difficult to grapple with is they need 47 additional parking spaces. We have no rational formula other than our personal opinion to reduce it by 8, 10, 20. Pick a number, but it's picking a number. And I think the public will go to the places they like. And if they don't like this restaurant, they'll go to someone else. If they come to this restaurant and they don't like something else in town, I think it may be coming close to density, but I don't know what the density of parking is in the downtown area, or how far people are willing to walk. If other boards had set stricter parking requirements, but I feel very uncomfortable picking a number out of thin air and saying, go forward, my son, and reduce the number of parking spaces. I think the better the restaurants, the better the businesses will survive. And there will be inconvenience. There's inconvenience downtown now.
All right, I'll I guess chime in. I'm probably less bothered, and usually I'm the nasty one. I'm probably less bothered than other people. I worked I worked at the Rue Bar for 7 years in my former life, and as Steve, you point out, I think that there were 2 parking spaces there to the rear. It's the nature of Main Street, and whether that makes it right or wrong, I just think there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. People will be walking to this. They might be stopping in other places. I think it's important to have signage in terms of, this parking only for SCM, maybe make a time limit on that. I think it's important to have screening out back. I guess my concern, I think Robert's point is well taken, the number of seats there. I think that maybe it is something to look at reducing. I mean, there's 20 bar seats I just looked at. You have the outdoor lounge. That is a big restaurant compared to a lot of restaurants on Main Street. So I think perhaps minimize, and there's a lot of spaces. I think you said 50 or 60 outside, seats outside. That lounge is big. I think that maybe there could be a reduction there. I'm not as troubled as Jerry is by how many numbers you pick, because they have 16 spaces. That's what they have. So that's what they're saying they can provide. And given the limitations of Main Street, I'm they're providing 16 where everyone else is providing virtually none. So I would be inclined to grant it, but subject to conditions, and I think I think we should have maybe pushed the applicant to try to reduce seating some more. And the other thing about the sign parking, I mean, maybe have a sign posted inside the restaurant or something like that, but I think it would look kind of weird, or to have a sign outside on St. Barnaby's side of the property saying, or Barnabas, saying, you know, no parking there. That's a private agreement between property owners. And I do think that the church should be taking kind of some more affirmative actions if this is a big concern for them, to keep people off their property as any other property owner should. So those are my feelings.
I just want to,
thoughts. Yeah.
I want to make myself clear. I see no problem with granting the 47 spaces. I think it will be absorbed in town.
It's not that this board is granting 47 spaces.
Okay.
This board is giving them the approval to go forward with the parking that they have, with the understanding it's a change of use, and it's up to them to prove that they can fit into the town. Nobody's counting parking spaces.
I thought that's what the applicant,
He gave an example of what they have that others don't have, and with the parking reduction, then it's the 47 out there in the public someplace that they're going to need, just like every other restaurant. So you're not asking for a certain parking.
but when we ask for a reduction in seating, that translates into reduction in parking.
It does.
And that's-
On the burden on the public parking, yes.
So I guess I'm confused, but, you know, maybe something else will come in discussion. Before we close it, I mean, I think you've heard what some of the discussion is. I don't know what the tenure of the board is, but, you know, I don't see any issues with it. Others may disagree.
But yeah, I think the board needs to finish and then let Mr. McKenzie. I will suggest one thing. I've heard a couple of you with the landscaping. I suggest that you allow Mr. McKenzie to work with them and then submit a landscaping plan instead of this board, you know,
I agree.
dictating what it is, because we don't know what the actual facade's gonna look like, the parking, and that could be done administratively either by the board or by myself. It's up to you.
There's also a big parking lot in the rear of the bank, Bank of America, that's, at nighttime is empty.
That's right.
And maybe you could enter some in a discussion with them.
We are in discussion, and we're in discussion with some of the neighbors who also have larger lots.
Okay.
This doesn't bother me at all. I've lived in Falmouth a long time. I've been downtown many times, of course, and I've never had to go home and say, well, we just couldn't find a space, that's why we're home. So I think this will ultimately be absorbed in some way. I think the concerns of some of the board members are definitely valid, but I say let it happen as proposed. I have just never not found a space downtown ultimately, and I don't remember ever driving around for 15, 20 minutes, a half hour saying, oh my God, I can't get a space. So just basic experience, I think this will all work out, and I don't think the parking will ultimately be a problem at all. And as Ed said, behind the Bank of America building, this, you know, I'm fine with it. That's the way I feel.
I know a place to park now.
So does everyone else.
Well, I generally agree with Paul. I think it would be nice if the applicant could be a good neighbor and reach out to the church and try to come to an agreement with some sort of buffering that pleases both sides. And I'm okay with the capacity as it's proposed, the 190. I'm sorry?
190, correct?
194.
194?
Yeah, 184.
Fine with that. As far as any further parking reduction goes, I mean, I would approve the project, but just a straw poll from everyone here to kind of guide the applicant. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I just have one more thought too. I think there was some public testimony, and I don't mean to interrupt what you were doing, TJ, and I'll start this straw poll. But there was some testimony about drinks and being near kids and encouraging this use. I think it's important just to reiterate that this is just here for the parking reduction, that the use is allowed as of right in the district, so we're not determining whether or not this restaurant use is appropriate next to the church facility. It's allowed as of right or under the zoning bylaw. So I just wanted to say that, and I mean, I would like to have them come back and see if there's any reduction and maybe propose some screening. I think that might be nice, and maybe perhaps some lighting and some signage. I think those would all be good things for us to have in place, and I think it can be difficult sometimes to condition, you know, a decision without that information before us. So I would be inclined to, I am inclined to grant, I just, or vote in favor. I would just think it might be to behoove you or to be to your benefit if you submitted stuff that you want, and then we could vote on it instead of us limiting you in a certain way.
And we will be happy to reach out to St. Barnabas and discuss the screening and signage.
Did you want to go through this stuff? I don't know.
I mean, that would mean we go into a continuation, right?
Yes.
Correct.
And then they don't get their permit for another 30 days after we vote on it, correct?
Just like anybody else.
Just like anybody else. Now, I think some of the things we're talking about could be handled in order conditions. They have to come back with the, you know, landscape plans and things like that. They know what we want.
Well, I think what Kimberly's asking is that they think about it, they submit a plan that the board can approve at the next hearing, and think about a reduction. I think that's what Kimberly's asking. More thought from the applicant and come back to the board. Is that not what the gist is?
That was it.
So,
I guess.
My position.
I mean, I think, well, we should hear from others, you know. I'm not concerned about a reduction in seating to accommodate less parking.
right, it's a board vote, so if you want to do that poll right now, let's do it and move on.
I could move forward with an approval with conditions.
Yeah, me too.
An actual approval tonight, or?
Actual approval
waiting
tonight,
for-
landscaping and things like, if we have a magic number for seating, we should put it out. If the applicant has heard us, I guess he could request a continuation, is that correct?
Or the board can.
You know, but I'm
Yes.
just saying,
Yes.
they have heard it. I mean, we prolong the agony for some people, but, you know, they know what we want.
Jerry, it's board discussion.
I'm talking to the board, just I can't, my old age, I can't turn completely.
Okay,
Well, Jerry, I hear you 100%, but with the outstanding issues here, I would want to see at least the screening in place on a plan. And there's also the issue of they're working out possibly that agreement with the bank. If they are able to secure that sort of parking, maybe they don't need to go for the parking reduction. So, I mean, that's between private parties. I'd like to see if they can maybe make progress on that. But I would at least want to see plans showing the buffering before I vote in favor.
I go along with that. Let's move on.
I would like to see some more information. And I don't think it's prolonging agony. I think the board has said we intend to approve this. I think that's but we want some more information. And I would just note that, you know, the busy season for a restaurant is in the summer. I think there's some time to make this right and ensure that it's right prior to voting and without, you know, cutting into that busy season for them.
If I can respond, maybe I can help. It seems like a majority of the board is comfortable with the seating capacity and having those spaces absorbed somewhere else in the town. It's helpful for us if we can get a place for employee parking and everything else. But if the board's comfortable with everything else, I think the board is comfortable enough to vote and with an administrative approval for the signage and for the landscaping, because that's only, the landscaping is really just a screening between us and St. Barnabas in the back where the two gates are, and some lighting that the board could approve on the parking lot.
Well, I'm not going to vote on it in favor without the additional information submitted by you.
Okay.
So, and whether that means 4 out of 5 might, but I won't. I think it's important to get that.
Well, for counting heads, I'd like to go forward tonight.
Okay.
1. Ed?
Yeah, I'd go for, let's just get it done.
2. I'm sorry. I just want to
So
speed
you're
this up.
risking a denial
Yeah,
here.
I
If you
mean,
can't,
it
try to work
it's-
it out a
it's-
little bit more, because a 3 to 2 vote's a denial.
I don't understand what the harm is, and we continue hearings all the time. I don't understand what the harm is of continue hearings, probably of less significance. This hearing potentially has an impact on Main Street, on downtown. They're applying to us now. Let's make it right when we do it instead of rushing through a decision. I mean, I honestly think it's foolish, and I think it's irresponsible in your role as a member of this board to just rush through decisions like this. And to say more information can be submitted that will make this a better approval and will make this a better project. And because you want to rush through it, with it, let's just get it on. Let's move forward. That we're not going to do the best job that we can do. I think
Well,
it's
listen.
irresponsible.
I'm offended by saying I'm irresponsible.
Okay.
This is a board, a judicial board. Applicants have a right to due process in a reasonable time. If the majority of the board is to vote against it, then we go to continuation to get the additional information. If there's 4 votes to close it tonight, we get that.
Fine.
And I can live with that. So, we're not taking a vote, we're trying to get a polling, I think someone says, of the feeling of the board, and then the applicant can come back based on the
And
feeling.
I'm happy to help. We would be willing to come back at another time. We'd ask
Okay.
for it to be short.
Okay.
And for a couple of reasons. My client's made a sizable investment. It's public record what was paid for. This property was bought several months back. We're putting a lot of money into this. We're going to employ a lot of people in town and provide good taxes and stuff to the town. We'd like to get the restaurant open as soon as we can. We've been waiting. And so we would agree to a continuance to come back with those additional things, but ask for it to be a short continuance because my client is anxious. He's sort of handcuffed sitting there and he can't do anything until we get an approval.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
That settles it. Do we make a motion?
How long would it take you to get together plans and to discuss?
We could
the
have them in
seating?
the middle of next week for you.
Oh, I'm not that ready.
Nick and Catherine are ready to open.
Okay, it's up to the board.
It's unlikely I'll be here next Thursday or the Thursday after, possibly next Thursday, if
You will?
unlikely will not.
Unlikely.
2 Thursdays from now, I will not be here. Next Thursday, possible.
Well, we have a
Well,
5th person,
right.
so as long as the hearing's not closed tonight, we do have somebody who can
Correct.
vote. So it's up to the board. Does somebody want to make a motion for continuation? We can do it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, October 19th.
You said not the 5th?
Do you want to do it the 5th?
I mean, if you can get the information in, Steve, that's a week
We can.
that addresses other people's concerns relative to timing.
We can absolutely have it in a week.
Okay. Want to continue it to October 5th?
Okay, I'll make a
At
motion to
6:30?
continue it October 5th.
Second.
6:30 at Town Hall?
Yes, town hall.
Town Hall.
Just with the change of venue, just wanted to be clear on
Thank you.
that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
The motion hasn't been called yet.
Motion was made by Ed, and was that second by Paul?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much.
All right, and we will take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
All right, we are back from our 5-minute recess. Coming up next, we do have 2 applications that are appeals of the building commissioner's determination. Just to get this out of the way before we start, the attorneys have agreed to have both applications open together due to the facts and the circumstances that are similar with both appeals. We do have one issue. We did reserve this room to accommodate the amount of people that we were anticipating. We were told a few minutes before our hearing began tonight that the library's alarm system is activated automatically at 9:30, and in order to leave, we'll need to wrap up the hearing at 9 o'clock. The attorneys have agreed to start with 15 minutes each. We'll go from there with board questions. If we do get to public comment, I would absolutely love to get to public comment if we can make it there. We might only have time for a few people. In the event that we do not reach public comment or we only reach a few people, I'd just like to remind everyone here tonight that you can come to the office to review the file. You're also allowed to submit written comments, which we will review before the next meeting regarding this matter, because it will be continued to a certain date and perhaps a new location. So with that having been said, we will go on to application 67-17, Midway Trap, 284 Old Meeting House Road, East Falmouth.
I'm going to recuse myself from this hearing.
Thank you, Paul. And with Paul recusing himself, it will be Robert and Jerry as voting members.
Okay, so I'll read both of these hearing notices into the record at once. So first, being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Midway Trap and Skeet Club of Falmouth, Inc. of T-Ticket Mass filed an appeal with the Falmouth Town Clerk pursuant to General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 8 and 15, and 240-202 of the Code of Falmouth, appealing the Building Commissioner's determination that the pistol range was a significant expansion by Midway and issued a cease and desist order on subject property known as 284 Old Meeting House Road, East Falmouth, Mass. For referrals on this matter, we had one from planning with no comment, and we received 5 letters with comments, concerns, 1 letter in support of the club. And the hearing notice for 6817, being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that George and Elizabeth Bagley and others of East Falmouth, Massachusetts, filed an appeal with the Falmouth Town Clerk pursuant to General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 8 and 15, and 240-202 of the Code of Falmouth, appealing the Building Commissioner's determination of a zoning violation, and that said cease and desist order issued should extend to Midway's rifle range on subject property known as 284 Old Meeting House Road, East Falmouth, Mass. On this matter, we received 1 referral from planning with no comment, 4 letters with comments, concerns, 1 letter in support of the club.
Okay, and I believe George and Associates have agreed to present their case first.
Which one do I talk to?
It's fine
Oh, okay. So, Bob Emmett, who is my opponent, and I have talked about this a number of times. We agreed that since the building inspector issued, and by the way, this is my associate, Susan Chu. She's an attorney in my firm and has worked a lot on this case. Bob Emmett and I agreed that since the building commissioner issued a cease and desist order, essentially against the Midway Trap and Skeet Club in July, telling them that they should cease and desist the use of their pistol range at Meeting House Road. Thanks, Susan. And since the building inspector did not issue a cease and desist order, as Mr. Emmett, Attorney Emmett, had requested on behalf of his neighbor clients, with regard to the rifle range, that
in essence, much of the facts, and certainly from our point of view, are germane to both of those cases, so we would present them. We would each present our appeal and our opposition to the appeal. So he appealed, Bob appealed the refusal or failure, however you want to put it, by the building inspector, Rod Palmer, to close the rifle range. I appealed his order to close the pistol range, but I'm going to talk about both of those things at the same time if I can. Essentially, the Midway Trap and Skeet Club is not the Bass River Rod and Gun Club. It's not the Monument Beach Club. Down here you have a number of clubs that have many hundreds, if not thousands, of members. It's a club that was formed in 1959, organized as an entity that had purchased its property in 1960, that had established a trap shooting range by 1962/63. That is a range where people shoot shotguns at clay targets that are thrown in the air. They had established, by the affidavits we have filed from members of the club of long standing, a rifle range, which they call a long rifle range. There is an aerial photo dispute about how long it was in what year, but it's been in the same exact place, shooting in the same exact direction since the 1960s. In fact, there is dispute about whether they had a pistol range. Mr. Attorney Emmett's clients who have filed affidavits have said the pistol range was built in 2014. Our clients, who are members of the club, and it has approximately 150 members, 125 members rather. It has about 50 or 60 life members, okay? It had, in the early 90s, 125 members. There's a newspaper article, congratulations, the club has reached its cap in membership, 125 members. It is not just a shooting club. In fact, it is a sportsman's club. It has clam bake facilities, kitchen facilities, a clubhouse. It rents the clubhouse out for occasions. They did a couple of weeks ago for a wedding. It runs about 20 different functions a year for its members, which are social, during which there is no shooting of any kind on the club grounds, either trap or, which is clay target shooting. A lot of you probably, most people for some reason know what skeet is. Skeet's a sport that was founded in Andover, Mass. In like 1912 or something. Trap has been shot for centuries, including over in England. But you can think of skeet. We don't have a skeet field. It's just a different layout, okay? But it's clay target shooting. You shoot shotguns at clay targets. Basically, they're made of some form of pitch, and they shatter. If they shatter, you get a score for hitting one. If they keep flying, then you don't get scored for hitting one. The trap shells go a maximum of 200 yards, depending on tree, cover, etc., geography, topography. It's usually far less, okay? The rifle and pistol range was, at its inception, one range, with a wider spot on the left-hand side for pistol shooting. I would submit to you, since we're arguing both, that there is no legitimate appeal here about the rifle range's existence predating this zoning bylaw of 1971. The range was there. We have affidavits filed by club members who either were members themselves or their fathers or uncles were members who state under oath they were shooting rifles before 1971. In the same place, in the same direction, whether it was 160 yards or whether it was 200 yards, or rather 260 feet, They believe it's a 100-yard range. That's what they refer it to, however, is a long rifle range. There is no affidavit filed by any of Mr. Emmett's clients that refers to any increase in noise, alleged increase in noise, any increased or adverse effect on the neighborhood whatsoever, other than they establish, and they say it in their affidavits themselves, Mr. Zimmerman and George and Betty Bagley and Hargraves, there are others. They all talked about the noise began to become bothersome with the construction or the implementation, use whatever word, different affidavits, of the pistol range in 2014. There's nothing about a rifle range creating a problem except some letters from my learned counsel who has submitted letters to the board stating that he believes things like shotgun shooting is not as loud as pistol shooting, stating things based on a statement that he got from a fellow who's actually a member of the club, who says that pistols can be louder than shotguns when the pistols are shot with muzzle brakes. There are no pistols shot at Midway, never have been pistols shot at Midway with muzzle brakes. I'm not quite sure what he might also mean is silencers. Silencers are not legal in Massachusetts. Maybe some SWAT teams have them. We don't have a SWAT team. The issue regarding the rifle range is not supported by the affidavit of the Bob Emmett clients. Okay, the issue was raised by those affidavits of whether or not there was, in fact, the construction of a pistol range in 2014, which those affidavits state, every single one of them, except a couple that don't identify the shooting with anybody or anything, including a guy whose name is Brian Rabessa, who happens to be a cousin of the president of the club. His name, is Mike Rabessa. Brian Rabessa lives across the street from the range, and he complains of constant noise. At some point in our continued hearing, probably you'll hear from Mike Rabessa about the reasons for Brian Rabessa's submission of a letter saying that this incessant noise is bothering him, but he doesn't identify the noise with anything. In fact, the only identification of any noise, the only allegation that there's any noise that is bothering the neighbors, not that that's the only issue here, because it isn't, is the affidavits of Mr. Emmett's, Attorney Emmett's clients that claim that with the establishment of a pistol range in 2014, the noise began to bother them. I would submit to you that one of the reasons the noise began to bother them is because there's an affidavit, in fact, that he has filed from a client who says, we bought our house in 2014 and the pistol range was installed in 2014. The homeowner who made this affidavit does not state when he exactly bought the house or when exactly he identified the pistol range, which he says was established the same year he bought his house, okay? And he doesn't establish how he knows, none of these people do, that it's pistol shooting or rifle shooting or shotgun shooting. Now, the club has, for many years, restricted its shooting hours from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you will hear in a continued hearing from Eric Dublirer, who is a club member, who has analyzed the club sign-in sheets, that something less than a fifth of the time that is available for shooting from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 7 days a week, something less than a fifth, that may be smaller, actually it involves time when shooting is going on in the club, including the trap shooting on Sunday, which Attorney Emmett has in his filings acknowledged predates the 1971 zoning bylaw and is immune from this effort to shut down any range at the club. And I appreciate that. It's not often that you find an attorney in a difficult case. I have a difficult side, he has a difficult side, when you find someone who's straightforward and honest about it, okay? I've been doing this for over 37 years, and I compliment him on that fact. he only knows what his clients tell him. I know what my clients tell me. My clients say that the pistol range was there long before 2014. They said in an affidavit that, I think it was Mike D'Souza, thank you, Susan, who says in his affidavit, one of 5 or 6 that we filed from members of the club, that the pistol range was cleaned up and a berm, a backstop, a new backstop, put in with sand, okay, in 2010. Yesterday, I sent to your administrator, to Sarah Suri, a letter which closes 2 pages from a 2001 report resulting from a February 1st, 2000, 17 years ago, visit by the DEP, Mass Department of Environmental Protection, to the Midway Trap and Skeet Club, in which they acknowledged that they saw in February of 2000 a rifle and pistol range and a trap range. And they made suggestions in this 2-page analysis, which was part of a thing called the Lead Shot Initiative, regarding the rifle and pistol range, which are at issue here. 1, put a backstop with ballistic sand on the long rifle range, okay? 2, put a backstop with ballistic sand on the pistol range. There'll be testimony, you'll hear it from the club members. They put the backstop in before 2010 on the rifle range. They didn't put that backstop in until 2010 on the pistol range. Why is that? It's a small club. It's a small club of people who are largely working people, who almost to a man live in the town of Falmouth. It's a recreational activity, often considered a blue-collar recreational activity, albeit there was one blue-collar guy who was there once. His name was Ned DeWitt. He's dead now. He was an attorney. Attorney Emmett has made the argument that Ned DeWitt filed or drafted a notice of prevention of easement, okay, in 1985 for the Midway Club, which did not mention the rifle and pistol ranges. Okay.
Attorney DeWitt, I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry.
Sir.
George.
Yes.
I hate to interrupt. I just want to give you a two-minute warning for your presentation.
I thought we got 20 minutes, no?
15.
Since we're doing both? Thanks. Well, you can read my paperwork about that, but the reality is Ned DeWitt, who's now passed away, was a member of the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club. He was a member of the Falmouth Skeet Club. He was not a member of the Midway Trap and Skeet Club. He had a friend named Steve Linnell or Lendell, who was a realtor, who asked him to draft a letter or an easement prevention document to be filed in the registry. He filed that only referring to trap shooting. The Falmouth Skeet rented space from the Falmouth Rod and Gun. He belonged to both. He knew Falmouth Rod and Gun shot rifles and pistols. He knew Falmouth Skeet only fired skeet. He didn't know that Midway used rifle and pistol ranges because he was only there on a Sunday, and they only shoot trap on Sunday, and they never shoot rifles and pistols on Sunday when they shoot trap, because the trap shooting covers, you know, a shot fall area that's large and to the left, and therefore in danger would be people on the rifle range. As for Chip Warlow's aerial presentation, if you go through it, and we've provided, I think, copies for everybody on the board, it shows that there are about 35 houses shown in the aerials that immediately surround the club. When the club was formed in 1959, when the club built its rifle and pistol ranges and shotgun ranges, or established them in 1960s, okay, there were no houses. There were no houses until 1991. Right? I ask you to pay careful attention to that. I ask you to pay careful attention to the affidavit of Priscilla Gary, who has filed a letter, Bob Amnett put it before you in his package, and she says, well, the rifle and pistol range has devalued the houses of the neighbors. She uses an example, and I think it's almost comical. Her example is that in 2006, a house was offered for $790,000, listed, okay? That it sold in 2009 for something like $550,000, and that's because of the gun club. And that's nonsense. 2009, okay? I'm sorry, 2009 was the bottom of the Great Recession. People were going bankrupt. People couldn't sell anything. In 2006, brokers were doing what brokers always do. We know what they do. You want to sell the house, they give you a high price, so they hope they get the listing. That letter also goes into the wind turbine issue, that houses were devalued because of the construction of the wind turbines. If I leave you with one thought, let me leave you with this. Whatever that case is about, I wasn't involved in it, I don't know much about it except this. The houses were there, they put in the wind turbines, and the houses, existing houses, complained for whatever reason, the noise, okay, the appearance of the wind turbines. This club was here first. It was here long before this neighborhood developed. It was here 30 years before it was developed. And it also, the letter from the broker, really indicates what's going on here. What's going on is these people have perfectly valuable houses. They just would like to make them more valuable by getting rid of the gun club. And that's, I guess, all I have time to say. I look forward to talking to you all. Appreciate your patience to listen to me. I'm sorry it's not more organized. I do have some photos. Can I give you some photos of the club so you have an idea of what we're talking about?
Yes, you can submit it to the clerk.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And my associate, Susan Chu, Attorney Chu, has just written some little notes on what view it is of the club. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Attorney George, I'd like to entertain brief questions from the board.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Bob, do you want to start us off?
I'm going to hold my questions at this time.
Kim, I'll give you a second.
Okay.
Jerry, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
Sir.
Do you have any annual reports or files as to information as to the degree and frequency of the use of the pistol, rifle, and skeet range, in the time frequency?
Yeah.
I mean, part of this is, I think, if I understand the Powers document, that it's been a significant increase, and I don't know what records the club may have or you could submit to us.
It's not a commercial range, so it's not like, Willie's gun range where it's commercial and people have to sign in and sign out as customers and there are employees to keep records. There is a login book, and Mr. Dubler has submitted an affidavit which went over, I think, from January until now. The answer to that question is there's also newspaper articles and club minutes that we submitted yesterday with our letter, which was somewhat in response to Bob Emmett's latest September 25th letter, but which shows that the club has been there for a long time. There are the same basic number of members, sir, as there have been. The only increase in membership has been life members, those who reach a certain age in their 60s and have been members for a number of years. There are, and my clients will tell you, basically the same number of people that shoot there as always shot there. Now, are there trap shoots? That's the only organized kind of shooting they have. They don't have pistol competitions to which the public is invited. They don't have rifle competitions to which the public is invited, okay? The only thing they have traditionally had is the trap shooting, and I believe people are allowed to come from the outside to shoot trap, and always have been. But it's a one field trap range. Many of the larger trap ranges, yeah.
In keeping of time, basically what you're saying is no additional information. I should go back and read what you submitted to get more clarity to
Well,
my
well,
question.
and hear my client's testimony, sir.
Of course,
That
no, I was
they are gonna comment on that, and I think they'll tell you what I've just said.
Do you have a statement or anything on how the Powers doctrine or the Powers case relate to this? I didn't
What's
see
that?
anything from you, I saw something from
What?
the opposing attorney.
Yeah, yeah. Can Susan respond to that?
Well,
She
I think
wrote-
we want more information next time rather than go into a.
No, we've submitted a letter with our appeal in which actually Susan drafted it, addressing the Powers doctrine.
Okay.
But-
I can sort of comment and answer that question in a way. I mean, the Powers Doctrine talks about frequency of use. I would posit that the club's hours are from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So in terms of parameters of use, you know, as long as they operate within those parameters, they fall within the Powers standard. And to analogize that, I would say, you know, I belong to a gym. It has certain hours. Sometimes if I'm busy, I might not go to the gym at all that week. And sometimes if I have extra time, I might go every day. And this is similar with the club. Everybody works. So, you know, if they have a day off, maybe they go shoot. But if they have to work, then they don't.
I mean, there's a Cochran case,
Cochran?
Cochran case filed by Bob Emmett, which he analogizes to the gun club. A guy was a contractor, and this is the last thing I'll say unless there's another question.
I'll go back and look at it in the
Yep,
interest
no,
of
no.
time. The other thing is.
But can I just
Sure.
make this point?
Yeah.
And answer your question. The Cochran case talks about a guy who mixed some cement in his yard for his construction business. Then he built a concrete manufacturing factory. The answer to your question on Powers is, we haven't changed the use in any significant way at all. There's rifle, pistol, and shotgun shooting by the same small number of a small sportsman's club on a very informal basis.
And the last question is on the notice of assessment in the words intent. Is that legally binding? If I remember correctly, the statement was they intend to use this as a trap and gun club. It makes no reference to rifle or pistols, and I understand
I think it's legally binding either way. It was a notice. You're talking about the notice of easement, of prevention of easement?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think that's legally binding in any way. I think it's
Okay.
evidence. It's evidence. That's all it is.
Just wanted to make a quick statement to kind of address Jerry's issue, and I should have done this before we opened up the hearing. It is board policy to receive correspondences and everything from the applicants one week in advance. Within the past few days from both sides, we received an enormous amount of information that, quite frankly, I did my best to review as much as I could to prepare for tonight's meeting, and I'm sure everyone else on the board did as well. But it was an enormous amount of information, and that's just part of the reason why this hearing will be continued tonight. This is a volunteer board. We do have day jobs, and we try our best to stay on top of the amount of information presented. So I just wanted everyone to know that.
Mr. Chairman, we were told, I thought, have everything in a week before. We did with Mr. Warlow's package, which we delivered on the 20th, the week before. We then got letters from Attorney Emmett to which we felt we had to respond. You know, once the date goes by, and I talked to him about it, he said, well, you know, he felt entitled to do that, that's fine. I don't argue
Sure,
with
no,
that.
no, and I understand
don't
that
argue with
100%. You're advocating for your clients, and I understand that completely.
Yep.
I'm an attorney, Kim is as well, so we do understand that. I'll just turn it to Kim for questions.
Okay, I just have a couple, just given the time constraints that we have. You made a point about how these houses were built after the fact, but, I mean, whether or not you needed zoning relief, there's no coming to the nuisance or any issue as far as that, right?
As to the nuisance, the comment is that the club is the same small sportsman's club with the same basic membership that it's had. Let me just subtract back to the 80s. Okay?
Yep.
If there was a nuisance here now, if you look at Chip Warlow's package of aerial emails, it shows how this neighborhood grew around the club, okay? from no houses to 35 houses. Just those shown in the aerials, okay, in the latest aerial, 35. Now, is it a powers doctrine that if a neighborhood grows up around something which the people then consider a nuisance, even though they knew, and I use a little tort lawyer language if you don't mind, should have reasonably known with the sign in front of the club saying it was the Midway Trap and Ski Club, less than 50 yards, I think it's a lot less than 50 yards from the entrance to Southview Way or whatever that goes into these houses, then I don't think that's a doctrine that powers would hold up. In other words, it's a question of which came first, the chicken or the egg. You know, did the use change? It didn't change. Did the use become more bothersome to the people who grew up around the club? Perhaps it did. But they knew it was there when they bought the houses.
Right, and I'm not quarreling with that. The question is, that's a distinct issue then, and you would agree, because whether or not you needed zoning relief for a change in use is a distinct issue than the fact that these people bought their homes in the 1980s.
I would never quarrel with you, and I agree.
Okay, great.
Okay?
The other, very quickly, 2 quick questions. You said that there was one range at the inception. There was a rifle and pistol range.
Right.
At what date was there 2 separate ranges? When did those come into existence?
Mr. Warlow's map, aerials,
Yes.
which are not 1 or 2, as Bob has submitted, or 3 or 4, they go all the way from 1968 to date, show a 50-foot wide rifle range, long rifle range, at the beginning of the range.
So that's the rifle range.
Extra 50 feet, the extra 50 feet on the left-hand side didn't go all the way down. It just went down for about 20 yards, and that's where they shot pistols. When the DEP came in and said, we want you to put in a backstop with ballistic sand for the pistol range and for the rifle range, they did the rifle range. They were tardy. They didn't do the pistol range for a number of years after that. When they did, all they did as a safety measure was they put a dirt berm between the 25-yard part of that range and the 100-yard part of that range. That's not a change in use. They shoot the pistols in the same place they used to shoot them. It was simply so that people shooting pistols would not shoot to the right, over to the rifle range, because it really was the same range up until 2010. But both things were shot in the same place.
Right,
Pistols
okay.
on the left, rifles on the right.
Right, so you just...
Sounds like Mr. Biaggi, but it's
So-
pistols on the left, rifles on the right.
So it was the same range until 2010. People were shooting in different area. Then in 2010, was there a different land area cleared?
No.
For a new range?
No, they cleared the trees and stuff over it. That's what they say in their affidavits, my clients. They cleaned it up. It's not expanded. They didn't expand the membership. They didn't go
No,
into.
I know that. I'm
you
concerned
know,
about the land area, the clearing
same
of the
land-
land
it's the same-
area.
It's the same basic land area.
Okay. And then the final question, and I don't want to cut into Attorney Ahmed's time. You mentioned that there's clubhouse facilities, event space, restaurant. How long has that use been ongoing on the property?
I understand that it's been going on since they built the house in like 1962, 1960, 62. The clubhouse, I believe, went up before the trap range even went in. Because there's notes that we've given you from minutes back in the 60s discussing buying generators and getting the electric service put in. It's not a restaurant, it's
A
it's
food
for
facility.
functions.
Okay.
Yep.
Understood. All right, thank you.
I mean, you can't just, I want to be clear, walk in there and order something.
I
you know,
understand.
Okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'm sorry.
Bob, did you have any questions? Okay. Attorney George, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hurry and members of the board, it looks like I have about 20 minutes. I have a presentation, which I would estimate is about 10 minutes long. I'd like to show you what I was going to show later, but just tell you what I have for you to take a look at. So let me see if I can do that without screwing things up here. Having a hard time getting the mouse, which I guess you can see there, onto where it should be. Oh, I'm getting there. Well. You can try that. Thank you very much, Kevin. It helps to prepare, and was here at 5:45 and it worked just fine. Anyway, as you know, I'm Bob Ament. I represent the 19 appellants in Appeal 6817 and some additional 40 neighbors to Midway. He's younger and better able to do it than I am. And some of them will describe to you, my notes say in a few minutes, but I think in a few weeks, their actual experiences as Midway changed over the years. I just want to show you what I have. This is an image made by a mapping expert at the Woods Hole Research Center, taken from a certified U.S. government photograph from the United States Department of Agriculture, dated in 1970. And we put a 300-foot line on that running from the structure of black spot at the bottom of that arrow, because the club advertised a 100-yard range. And you can see in that photo that the cleared area as of, it was October of 1970, just before the zoning change. By that time there was a clearing in the area of the present rifle range. This is a map which is also prepared by the expert at the research center, but it is identical really in what it shows to a photo that's included in the Midway presentation. And what you're looking at to the left side of that 300-foot line is what was cleared in 2014 to expand the area so that it could be used for the dedicated pistol range. That's the area, you can see it's freshly cleared, that was examined by the building commissioner earlier this year, and he determined that that work was done in within a few years of his inspection, not back in 2010, but much more recently. I just want you to keep those photos in mind while I make my presentation. Midway was incorporated as stated about 1960, incorporated in 1959 actually, bought its property in 1960. Just yesterday, Attorney George submitted minutes of some of Midway's meetings in 61, 62, 63, and 65. Now early on, the trap range, which is the wide area where you can see the trap stations at the bottom of the clearing, that was being developed, and the minutes report on the progress. There is no mention whatsoever of any other ranges, and no other shooting activity described except for trap, except for holiday turkey shoots, which were reported in the Enterprise. Those were the articles Mr. George referred to. And they were held on the trap range in November and December of 1961, and then just annually in 1962 and 63. There's no evidence been presented at all in any minutes or any newspaper articles or anywhere else that turkey shoots continued after 1963. And this isn't very persuasive evidence that shooting ranges were a prevailing club use of the property at the end of 1970. 1970 is important because the zoning bylaw was amended on March 1, 1971. We were unable to determine and obtain from the planning board or the town clerk the date that there was an advertisement for the hearing on that zoning amendment. It would have been in early January or in December, and that's the date, the effective date of the zoning bylaw change, which was actually voted on March 1. So the end of 1970 is the date, the most important date here. Mr. George's letter of yesterday refers to minutes in October 1962, which mention a member being a range officer and assistant gun captain. He says that's evidence that there must have been an additional gun range because the trap field had not been completed. But the minutes of a year earlier, August and October of 61, said that the trap house and generator house were complete and the club would be ready for its first shoot soon. And in fact, there were shoots, as I just mentioned, in November and December of 1961. And wouldn't a trap range have needed a range officer and gun captain throughout 1962? The 1968 aerial photograph, I don't have that, but it was a photograph prepared by the club's photo expert, and you have it. It's completely inconclusive as to whether there was a gun range. That you can make out a very slight widening of an old woods road that went through the property in the location, partly in the location that's today the gun range. Now maybe there was some shooting in that narrow slot in the woods at the time. So as I mentioned, we have this government photo and we have the image from Midway's experts photo of 1971. So now we're up to 1971, and both show a widened open space that encompasses a portion of the area where the rifle range is today. In those photos, you cannot make out any detail. So this is the 2014 photo. This is that's the photo showing the clearing. You can't make out any details of a shooting range, and the opening allowed for a shooting range about 150 feet long, according to Mr. Warlow, the club's expert. He initially said 160 feet. Based on the mapping we did, we think it was shorter, but he said it could be 150, so let's assume that's right. There are no club minutes, no newspaper notices, or other documents that have been submitted for the period from January 1965 until December 1984. There is no evidence whatsoever other than photos, which are empirical evidence. This isn't all just about what people are saying. We have aerial photographs. But we have nothing, no documents or anything about shooting. And by then the club was planning to give notice to abutters and at the Registry of Deeds to try to prevent complaints about the club. And they gave it, the minutes that were provided by Mr. George yesterday in 1984 say that the club instructed its people work on that to say that it's a shooting club and what our purposes are. And that led to the notice that you've seen in your file, and it's been discussed in correspondence from both sides. The notice was drafted by Ned DeWitt, as you said, and I won't go into that in detail, but the notice specifically said twice, we're a trap club, we intend to remain a trap club. The document was based on earlier notices that Mr. DeWitt had prepared for the other clubs in town, which specifically referred to shooting ranges. It was edited to take that out. This was a purposeful intention to state what was the Midway was about, and it said that it was a trap club, and people were entitled, even if it wasn't legally binding, to rely on that as they bought their properties. Midway's president and treasurer signed the notice at the time. It's strong evidence that if there was any shooting, the shooting range was not a primary or prevailing use at the time. It may have been an incidental use of the property, but an incidental use under the case law will not have non-conforming use status. Now, it's been suggested there's been no complaints about the rifle range. I refer you to Robert Dutra's affidavit, which you have, which is consistent with the evidence that the prevailing use, even in 1986, was trap and not shooting, and that things have changed. He said, I've been a resident of Waterby Estates since 1986. Members of the club told me at that time that they had no intention of increasing the shooting. The only shooting was on Sunday morning from 10 to 12. That was trap. Also, you have in your file a letter from Brian Rabisa, which was just referred to. He's lived since 1978 across from the club on Old Meeting House Road. His letter talks about the change over the years from trap only to a much greater increased shooting. We know that whatever rifle range there may have been, incidental or otherwise, it was only about 150 feet long when the bylaw changed in 1971. And again, according to the picture I've shown in Midway's own photo specialist, today the range is about 275 feet long. That's an increase of more than 80%. And that's using Midway's figures. Even if there was a pre-1971 shooting range that became a non-conforming use, an 80% increase is a substantial extension, one that has led to a great increase in use and with adverse impacts. Mr. George submitted a copy of a state inspection report of the shooting range made after a state inspection in early 2000. That's 29 years after the zoning change. It speaks directly to what Kimberly Balin said. The issue here is what was there in 1970. It's not when were houses built or where were they located, but even, as I've said, there are people besides those in Waterside Estates who are complaining about the noise, how it's changed over many years. It changed much more in 2014 when you read the information we've submitted, when you hear from the neighbors, you'll be able to weigh what they say. Something happened in 2014, and what it was the expansion of the pistol range that we've shown you on the plan. The aerial photo tells that story. Now, any non-conforming use must date from the zoning amendment. The use prior to zoning change cannot have been incidental. It must have been a prevailing use, and submitted case law says the burden of proof is on the property owner. In 2014, the range area was significantly expanded laterally with clearing for the present pistol range. I'll just show you that again. The clearing is not shown on the club's expert's 2012 photo plan, his image. It wasn't there in 2012. It's not shown on a professional land surveyor's survey of the club property done in March of 2014, because at that time the club was seeking permission, or its tenant was seeking permission to install a communications tower on a corner of the property. So a survey had to be submitted, and it's dated March 2014, and it shows a rifle range that doesn't include the expanded area that we see in a photo just a few months later. The building commissioner inspected the property, as I said, this summary determined from physical observation of soils and vegetation that the pistol range was cleared within a few years earlier. For sure, the pistol range did not exist when the zoning bylaw changed in 1971. The neighbors know that the pistol range was cleared and ready for use in June 2014 because that's when the noise situation became a crisis, as you'll hear from them. Maybe what was merely tolerable but violated zoning previously would have stayed the way it was. People would have put up with it. But the activity, because of the expansion of the range, became intolerable, and here we are today. Now, these cases, these two appeals before you, are not about closing down the trap club. That is not the intent. The trap shooting on the club field is a non-conforming use. This case is about regulating the rifle range and pistol range, which were not prevailing club activities in 1971, nor for many, many years later, but they might now be but not legally. Those ranges, even if there was some shooting other than trap before 1971, are not protected. From submitted correspondence and by testimony, you should find that the ranges do not reflect the nature and prevailing purpose of the trap club as it existed in 1970. It was a trap club, and the nature of the shooting at a trap field versus the rapid fire shooting on the ranges, which happened to be closer to residences than the trap club, that alone meets one of the 3 tests of the Powers case and means that a special permit is required for the resulting use. The rapid fire range shooting is different in quality and character as well as degree of activity from the trap club, the second test of Powers. And the neighbor's actual experience in recent years and earlier, not mere speculation, shows that the resulting use from the expansion of the shooting ranges has had a very different impact, a very adverse impact on the neighborhood compared to the trap shooting. So if any one of those tests is met under Powers, the use is not protected, the use is illegal, and can only operate if a special permit is obtained. All 3 of the Powers tests are met in this case. So under these circumstances, as the building commissioner found, Midway should be required to apply for a special permit so that they can legally operate, but until they do that, they can't legally operate either the rifle range or the pistol range, in our opinion. The building commissioner agreed with us with regard to the pistol range and thought that the evidence was not as clear with regard to the rifle range. I would point out that at that time, when he made that decision, we didn't have as good photography as we have here now. And we also didn't understand that the notice recorded by Midway was the last of the 3 club notices, and that it was very intentionally changed from a notice that included a description of shooting ranges. So if there was a special permit, the board could require appropriate sound testing, regulate hours of operation, types of weapons and devices used, address safety concerns, and set conditions for noise reduction, such as the construction of properly designed and insulated shoot houses at the firing range to cut down on the noise. If the increased shooting is properly regulated, I'll be done in 1 minute. If it's properly regulated, the club and the neighbors may be able to live in harmony. Now, the club may say that there's not much range shooting going on, only a 1/5 of the hours. Well, the experience that the neighbors had earlier, after the expansion of the range, was a much more serious situation, and we believe that the club has cut down on its shooting in recent months because of the appeals that have been made. Without a special permit, we don't have control over what can happen on the site. We need permanent protection regulation by a special permit. And as is pointed out, the issue is not when houses were built or where they've been built. It's all goes back to what was there in 1970. Thank you.
Sure.
Is there a date, sir?
November 16th.
November 16th?
November 16th. I've talked to both Attorney Ament and Attorney George.
Location?
I don't know a location yet. It'll probably be the high school.
Yeah. Should we say?
I can't guarantee it.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on the functions they have there. The only thing I can do is make if you guys can make a vote to continue it, it will either be at one of the schools, and I will get notices to Attorney Ament, Attorney George, and Shu, and then I'll post it. That's all I can do.
Before
I mean, this isn't going to work here.
No. Before we make that motion, I just want to thank everyone in the public for showing up tonight. For those who weren't here when we first opened up our hearing earlier tonight, we usually meet in the Selectmen's Room at Town Hall. In the event that we had our meeting there and we were over capacity, according to Massachusetts general laws, we would have had to shut down the meeting and postpone it to another time. And the time restrictions in this room, we were only aware of a few minutes before we started tonight. So if you want to submit any written comments for the file, you can, and we will review that before the next meeting.
And they will have an opportunity for public comment in the future.
And public comment will occur the next meeting.
May I just ask an audience question? How does one in the audience find out when the meeting is and where?
We're about to make the motion for that right now.
It will be posted on our website. We will, and I will let the attorneys know. I will let anybody who calls me, I will let you know, and you can spread the word. Peter, I know, talks to the people in his development. Nathan Swain, I know from the gun club. So
My second question is.
we really need to vacate.
Will we be the first item on the agenda? Or you would
I don't know. I
you
haven't made that determination.
see what I mean? If it's continued because of.
Yeah, okay, so I'll make, excuse me, we're still having a hearing too. I'll make a motion, sorry.
It's all right.
I'll make a motion to continue to November 16th, 2017 at 6:30
At a venue to be determined.
At a venue
And notified the public.
to be determined.
I don't
Do
know
we
what
want to
else I
pick
can
a, why don't we say here, and then I just would feel, I think we need to provide a venue.
Okay, you pick here and then I can change
Here, and then, and that's on applications, well, 6717 and
it.
6817.
Unless the board would entertain, excuse me for interrupting. Entertain having it held earlier.
Earlier in the day.
Earlier in the evening.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm just gonna, wait one
Then we
sec.
could hold it here.
How early can?
Yep, that's fine. I don't have any.
Okay, what time would the board?
5:30?
5:30?
5:30. And this will be, okay.
Then we will do it 5:30 here.
Okay, so a motion to continue to November 16th at November 16th, 2017, application 6717 and 6817, at 5:30 here in the library. That's my motion.
I second it.
Okay, motion was made by Kim, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Now I hope I can get it.
I apologize. I don't know who you are, ma'am, and not all of us here with Peter, with some of the neighbors that live in the association are not with the attorneys and everything, so we just need to know where to get that information.
November,
Yes,
it's,
the website, and it's always posted with the town clerk. It
And we
will
just-
be November 16th, 5:30. Hopefully here, we will check in the morning to.
It'll be here.
get the room. Yeah, or the ZBA website, we post it.